Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Miller, Director of Life Planning here for the Hedley Hoeger Group at Baird. And today I'm excited to be chatting with Kolby Goodman of The Job Hunter, a career and life coach we work with closely.
Morgan, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, Kolby. Kolby, if you haven't had a chance to be introduced yet, specializes in helping young adults navigate the often challenging transition from college into meaningful work while also helping parents understand how to support that process in healthy, productive ways. Because Kolby works with both young professionals and their families, he has a unique perspective on what's happening in today's job market, what employers are really looking for, and where stress and misalignment tend to show up.
It's a different universe out there right now, Morgan. I know, especially since you and I came out of college,
I'm
and I'm
sure.
sure,
Yeah.
and I'm sure way different than when these parents watching right now came out of college longer ago than any of us want to admit. And so I'm happy here today to talk to you more about what is the market like today, what these young professionals can do, what these parents can do so that the transition from college to career is exciting and meaningful and not empty and frightening.
Well, we certainly don't want empty and frightening, but let's start talking about that disconnect, if you will. So I know you work, like I said, with both young professionals and their parents, but where do you think the biggest gap is between what employers want, what parents think employers want, and what actually gets a recent grad hired?
So, what now that belts are tightening, companies are less likely to hire warm bodies, unlike they did 4 or 5 years ago at the peak of the employment market. They're not looking at a young person as a hire. They're looking at them as an investment in salary, benefits, leadership, time, mentorship. And the young people that get hired quickly in today's market are very clear in knowing and communicating what is their unique value add. Because again, if you're asked to have a return on investment, you need to be delivering value as quickly and as often as possible. And those who are really floundering in this process are those that are saying, here's my qualifications, here's the jobs I've done, you tell me how to help you. And that just is falling on deaf ears. So I can tell you that the what employers want and need are impactful problem solvers who relieve pain and drive value. And who's being left out in the cold are qualified professionals who simply are looking to do a job.
So start with the value add and kind of leave the credentials for another conversation.
I think it's part of the whole formula, but you can't just let your credentials speak for themselves. My
Okay.
analogy always is if I'm running late to a meeting and I'm running into the corner store and I'm getting a pack of gum because I have mad coffee breath, right? I'm not looking at the back of the packet and saying, okay, well, what exact ingredients are in this thing? I'm looking at the front and I'm saying, will this thing solve my problem? Will it give me minty fresh breath? And if it takes away that pain and that anxiety, I'm going to buy it. But if all was on the package was a list of these complex chemical ingredients, I would be so confused and I would pass over that product.
So let's zoom back in for a moment. What is some of the most common, well intentioned advice that you hear a lot that often backfires?
So when parents call me in desperate need of helping their children, the number one concern I get from them is little Johnny and little Susie isn't doing enough in their search. And that's it. So, okay. Well, what do you mean by enough, mom or dad? It's like, well, they're not like calling enough people. They're not applying to enough jobs. I don't see the effort. And I would say that is the big red flag of a massive disconnect between parent and child in this process because it is more nuanced than that. And so I push back and say, like, well, what is enough? And how do we know if that enough is the right effort? And so I shift and pivot my parent clients, so to speak, in this way of like, let's help them work smarter and not just harder. Because ultimately, in their day, understandably, it was a numbers game. You send out 30 applications, you get 4 or 5 interviews, and you land one job. That is not the case anymore. As the barrier to entry for access to jobs declines to simply applying for a job going like this on your phone, and the amount of competition is skyrocketing, pure effort and pure numbers in your job search do not matter nearly as much as the strategy of the effort invested.
So perhaps for those parents who are feeling, anxious or possibly unsure right now, what are a few of the healthy, constructive ways they can support their student or recent grad?
Yeah. And I'll preface this, and we were just talking about this before we record here, Morgan, is I'm very new to this parent game.
Okay.
I have a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old. But I feel like I'm getting, and what I'm prefacing this with is, even with my 4-year-old, right? Like I cannot tell him how to do something. I can either show him or I can ask questions to get him to get his own answer. whether you're 14, 4, 14, 24, 44. I think all kids kind of act that way. And
Sure.
so my advice to parents is to get extremely curious and do your best to remove judgment. And I know that's super hard and it's easier said than done. But if you can get really curious about your children's ambitions, their goals, dreams within their careers, it gets them to talk out loud and gets them to help you better understand where are the gaps in knowledge. So lead with curiosity first and then offer to help. That is what I've seen to be the most impactful way to help move the needle for a child on the precipice of becoming a real adult with a real job.
So then that kind of leads us into what does working with you look like for a family or a recent grad, if you will?
So it comes in a few phases, right? So first, we need to understand what is this young professional's target career, right? And if they don't know it yet, that's totally okay. Or if they want to make a pivot or, they've gone to school and they realize like, I've done this for 4 years. I can't do this for 4 more. I can help them with that. But first we need to set up a target because if we don't set up a target first, then what I call it's like shooting darts in the dark, right? We might hit something. Why do you want to go out there and face these problems, solve these challenges for these people? It helps bring more meaning and more intention to their career and to their search. Once we get that target set, then I'm helping them with all of the logistics and the strategies. So I'm writing a resume for them, cover letter, LinkedIn profile, and I do this for them versus teaching them to do it. One, because it's a heck of a lot faster for me to do it for them, but also we're just not equipped to sell ourselves on the page at a level that gets people to notice. There's a lot of humility, there's a lot of misassumption, there's a lot of underselling that goes on when people write their own documents, write their own marketing, so to speak, that we can't afford to happen in your child's process. So I'm doing that all for them. It is collaborative because what I know is that the resume that they're giving me is a small sliver of the reality of their experience, education, skill set. And then I'm walking them through developing an application and networking strategy, giving them goalposts in terms of how many applications a week, how many outreaches a week, how many coffees or lunches or Zooms you're going to have a week. And then, of course, I prep them for interviews where we talk about the message they want to send, the stories they want to tell, and most importantly, what emotions they want to evoke out of the interview. That last part's super important because we need to make a human connection. So I teach professional connection. And then, of course, at the end, helping them negotiate that first salary, that first offer. Too many young people, heck, too many old people aren't negotiating.
Right, especially because that first kind of salary conversation is the most important, right? Because that's the foundation that you then build upon throughout the rest of your careers. What has changed, would you say, in the college to career landscape that makes this transition feel so much harder than it used to? I know you talked a little bit about, in this world of AI, you want to still make a person
Mhm.
connection right from the very beginning. But could you talk a little bit more about why everything feels so much harder right now?
Yeah. So it's a multitude of things. One is that there is more competition for your young professional now more than ever. I think according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, something like 2.8 million new graduates are walking across the stage this year. That's the most ever in American modern history. There's a lot more competition. Graduating classes are either or underemployed, meaning that they don't have a job or they're in roles currently that did not require a college degree. So not only is your young person battling the millions of current graduates of their year, they're also competing against the graduates from previous years who still have not been able to kind of fit into the career track that college has promised. So that's a big reason why. Also, because there's just less opportunities, investment in the college to career pipeline, unfortunately. So since COVID, a lot of internships have been cut and programs have not been brought back. Corporate investment at colleges has dwindled. College recruiting has gone down immensely. And so the pipeline is just broken. In past generations, it has been there. The companies have been at the career fairs. They have been in the classrooms. And then two, as I mentioned before, like your degree is no longer a get a job free card like it used to be. Kind of like getting into college, right? Like good grades used to be your ticket to college. Heck, a big enough check got you into college, right? But now you need to have the grades, you need to have the AP classes, you got to be the
The
captain of the team.
extracurriculars.
Yeah, you basically can't sleep between freshman and senior year of high school in order to get into college. And so that's kind of what's happening from the college to career cycle is so much is being asked of this young person, internships, leadership roles, all these things. And so what I tell my client families is the earlier you can start this process, the better. Like, because I would rather have you take small steps over 4 years than panic over the last 4 months because you're going
Right.
to have much greater chance of success taking it slower and more consistent.
Okay. So I guess that kind of leads me to the big question, right? Is college still worth it with rising costs and uncertainty? How do you kind of help families think about that return on investment?
I think it's a good question, and I appreciate that more families are asking the question because it means they're thinking proactively. It forces independence and conscious decision making out of a young person earlier, right? The scaffolding from high school to college kind of fades away a little bit more gently than college to career, where it fades away completely. So having those guardrails is important and enough freedom. I think being able to sample from curriculum or sample from life is important. Going to, trying out a class, dropping a class, failing a class. I think in college and as a young person, it is equally as important to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what you do want to do. And if you don't experiment enough, what I don't want to do bucket isn't full enough. And you end up making those mistakes later in life. And I would argue larger with more mistakes. And then lastly
This
is
is
the
that
social.
quarter life crisis, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll have another recording of when I went through mine, but it's sampling a little bit with little to no, like with relatively little repercussion. And then lastly, I think is the social and the people part, right? You get kind of this baptism by fire, getting put on a dorm room floor, getting put into a massive classroom, getting put into a group project with people that you don't really know, that you were forced to work with. And hello, that's the real world, right? You don't get to you don't get to pick your group project in your first few jobs. And so having the ability to navigate different personalities, to understand who you are in a space where you can kind of do some self-exploration, I think that's where the ROI comes from. If your child is just going to show up to campus and go to class and then go home, and that's it, I would argue potentially it's not worth it for them. But if you're going to go to school and really sample and get engaged in the campus,
Yeah.
make new friends, be a part of clubs, run for leadership positions, like really kind of leave that comfort zone as often as possible, then the ROI is infinite.
Better human experience like it, I
There's
guess.
not, I mean, it's funny. It's when I go back and I speak at colleges relatively often and I say, like, you got to I am the old guy. I was like,
Yeah.
cherish this time because after you leave this place, there is no other time in your life where all your friends magically show up at the same time at the same place.
So you've talked a little bit about like a value add or like a ready now talent, if you will. What do those two terms mean? Could you give us a little background?
The way that I put it is value add from from any person to any person or organization kind of comes in two buckets. First one
Okay.
is the business bucket. How is that person going to help drive revenue, reduce costs, limit time spent, or reduce future risk? Okay, so make money, save time, be more stable. Right.
Okay.
That is your asset oriented ROI. It's the same way that a company is evaluating if they're going to buy a warehouse or a forklift or a copy machine, right? And not to dehumanize anybody in the audience, but that's how you're being looked at. You're looking at it as an investment with an ROI. The other side of it, I think a lot of people, not enough people talk about their monetary ROI, even less people talk about their human ROI. So how are you building trust? How are you buying back time from the people? So how does your expertise, your passion, your skill set allow you to make the business better? And how does it make the people better? So those are the value added things that you do.
Okay.
Second part of your question is, okay, well, like, what does that actually mean in this process?
Thank you.
And this is, yeah. And this is where we have to go counterintuitive to what we've been told our entire life, right? So
Okay.
if we even look at a job description, it's this laundry list of like, okay, I need you to have this kind of experience. I need you to, do this kind of work. And what it's asking us to do is, can you do this work? And if you can, you should apply. But in all honesty, a good leader and a good company with a great culture isn't asking for simply another job doer. They need somebody who can come in and understand what problems are happening, why they need to be solved now, and how they can contribute to developing, testing, and implementing the solution. Okay. And I'll admit that sounds really big and massive and can really get a lot of young professionals really wide eyed and busy. Okay.
Like I'm looking right now.
Two things I help my clients with is A, understanding what are their superpowers and how does it help the people around
Wow, Colby, that was a lot. I'm still
them.
processing.
And
That was amazing.
that's why this happens. Again, it is a complete mindset shift because it goes against everything we've ever been taught, right? Work hard, do the job, get rewarded, rinse, repeat. That doesn't work
Yeah.
anymore.
And now
You
you
have
have
to
to be a
work
little psychic. You have to
You got
be
to be
able to.
strategic. Yeah, you've got to have the conversations. You have to unearth the problems, right? Because there's so many other people that can do the job that have acquired the knowledge or the skills to do it. Because education has been democratized, which is awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, we were
But
able to
everybody
learn. And
has the same answers.
yeah, how do you apply those answers? How do you apply that to the problems at hand? Is what's going to differentiate your child from the next one who simply can just say, "Well, I know how to do the formula." It's I'm going to screw this up. Um, Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad, right? And so a lot of people know what a tomato is, but when you try to apply the knowledge to problems or to projects, does that come across? And that's how your young person can differentiate themselves by being able to instill passion and wisdom on top of all the knowledge that they've gathered for the last 4 years.
I just, keep thinking, where were you however many years ago when I was graduating? And I could have really used some, focused help and more strategizing. But there we are.
And what I'll tell you there, Morgan, real quick, is I felt the same way. There's a reason I'm doing this work today is because little naive green Kolby needed somebody, right? Like
Yeah,
when I wrote my book, which you guys have there in the office employed by
we sure
graduation.
do. Yep. Love the new cover.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is an apology letter to my 22-year-old self. Kolby, I'm sorry this was something like this when you were this age. And so
Right.
helping the young people out there kind of avoid the pain and the suffering that it sounds like you and I went through
Yeah.
because we didn't know. People assumed, or we assumed we thought we should know. You have to elevate a little bit more, but your young person is capable. They're extremely smart and passionate about what they want to do. They just don't know the rules yet. And that's what I'm helping them to understand so they can play the game really well to get what they want out of it at the end.
I went to a very big state school, and I think I met my advisor twice in my 4+ years there. So if you're going to a bigger school, you just don't have anybody to really show you the ropes, especially for post college, right? I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but there is obviously this added layer of AI, which is either exciting or terrifying, depending on what you're reading today or who you're talking to. But from your perspective, what actually matters for new grads and what shouldn't parents panic about? Because I think we've talked a lot about panic and fear so far.
Yeah. I agree with the sentiment that you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced with somebody who knows how to use AI. And we're in its infancy here. And I think a lot of people still use AI as if they use Google, right?
Yes.
Like a quick fact discovery machine, right? But if you can start to use it as a coworker, as a sounding board, as a devil's advocate, as, this external brain to kind of process and question what you assume, that's really good. Because what can be really helpful for an employer if your young person goes into a job interview and they hear about a problem that somebody's having, if they speak to, hey, I can help you solve this. And here's how I think I can use these technical tools to help us solve that problem, ensuring that your child is AI literate. And again, not just like, oh, I use ChatGPT to write my history reports, but how are you using it as this companion, as this resource versus a shortcut into a textbook or a dictionary? The other part of it, ensuring that they're not relying on AI solely in their search and their preparation. What I love about AI and those who know how to use it really well is that it's teaching a lot of people how to ask better questions. And I love the art of asking a question because if you ask the right question, you get such a powerful answer. But if you ask a bad question, you get a harmful answer. And so if you're a young person, and maybe something you need to work on too as a parent, as we talked about earlier, is asking good questions.
Yes.
Because if you can ask really good questions of the AI, you get much better answers. If you ask much better questions from the interviewer or the manager, you get much better answers that then allow you to take action.
Okay. So what would an example be of a really good question? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
Yeah. So historically it's been called prompt engineering. I
Yeah.
think that's a really fancy term. Now, like, how do you ask the computer a good question? Um, I think it's things like what I do when I prompt engineer or ask better questions is like give it a roll. This is a prompt I give all my clients, and I'll give to your viewers and listeners here. As we talk about trying to solve a manageable problem versus simply just doing a job, and I tell my clients upload the job description into your AI of choice and tell the AI your role is the hiring manager for this position. I want you, based on the company, based on your responsibilities as a manager, and based on what you're asking for in this job description, what potential problems or missed opportunities could you be facing that you want the next new hire in this role to solve? And then click enter and see what it spits out. Because what that prompt is going to do for you is it's going to understand what are the overarching business objectives, what are the manager's big concerns, issues, what's on their radar, and based on the job description, what skills and experience do they want them to bring so that they can then deploy that new employee to the problems. And so instead of going into the interview or creating a cover letter as I can do this job, let me tell you when I've done it, you say, I think if you're facing these three problems, let me talk to you more about how I've solved similar ones in the past.
So it's helping you create a strategy map.
A strategy map and empathize with somebody who needs a problem solved and not simply who needs a job done.
I love that. I mean, that was like a 3-paragraph question instead of
I
just
will,
being like,
yes,
how,
yes.
how can I get this job? Question mark.
And I'm sure what Morgan will do is I'll send her the prompt after this and she'll include it right below this video so you all can copy and
I
paste it
sure.
and use it as your own ways.
Yes, I will, Colby. Thank you so much for calling that out. I appreciate it. Okay, so one last question just to wrap up the conversation. There's always that conversation around the comparison trap or on
Oh,
social
yeah.
media, you see everybody getting the first job they applied for and everybody's making 6 figures right out of school and it makes it look like everybody has it all figured out or that everyone else's kids has it all figured out. So, how do you help families keep perspective when
Yeah.
the comparison trap is so easy to fall into nowadays?
It's funny. So one of the first exercises I have all of my young professional clients do is take a 1 week social media detox.
Wow.
Two
Okay.
reasons. One is because it becomes the default distraction. We all do it,
Yeah.
whether it's social media, whether it's YouTube, whether it's our email, whether it's our fantasy football team. We all have that digital vice that we drop into. So helping them rewire their brain so that they're not defaulting to that when things get uncomfortable. And secondly is to dissuade just exactly what you're talking about is how do you feel about yourself and your efforts when you put yourself in this productive bubble? Right. What I will say to you, and something I heard somewhere about social media that I really like is don't fall in the trap of comparing your insides to everybody else's outsides. It is
Right.
very rare that a parent will post on social media after they've had a knockdown, drag out fight at the dinner table with their child about doing more to get a job. Right. They will absolutely do it when, junior comes home with that first paycheck, but not about all the pain and suffering that led up to that. Challenging these families to ask themselves, are we doing what's in our power right now to help? Right. Because that's the one biggest thing about this process. It's the number one question that I get that I just don't have an answer to. I haven't bought an expensive enough magic 8 ball to tell them is like, when is my child going to get a job? How long should this process
Yeah.
take? I can't tell you, but I can't tell you exactly how long, but I can tell you it'll feel like an eternity. And I think that's actually a feature and not a bug. And what I mean by that is your child can go get employed, right? Starbucks is hiring, Walmart's hiring, they can go deliver for Amazon, they can do Uber. So we're not looking for any job. We're helping them land the right job. And the right job comes along when the preparation and the opportunity align. And as long as your child and your family is doing their best in that moment, then you should consider yourself making the right moves.
I love that. And if I find a magic 8 ball on Amazon, I'll make sure to send
Please
it.
let me know. I will pay top dollar for that accurate future predicting 8 ball.
Right. Okay, Colby. Is there anything else you want to talk about while we're on today?
What I can tell you is that if your child is suffering, it's not their fault. It's not your fault either. The rules have changed. The game is different. And instead of fighting it, if you can just learn the rules better, your child will win.
Yeah, I love that. I know that the rules, God, have changed since I've been out. And I mean, I would not want to I would not want to go through that training ground again.
Yeah, it's a huge baptism by fire. I
Yeah.
would have sunk faster than I did when it happened the first time. And so I give these young people credit in the fact that they're persevering. But We all need a leg up at some point, and the faster we can raise our hand and say, "I need help," the less pain and
Faster you get
suffering
that.
you and your family will.
Yeah, the faster you can get that for sure. So, okay, well, thank you, Colby. This has been incredibly helpful. And now, just if you could leave parents or grandparents maybe watching this with like one mindset shift for this season, what would it be?
What problems does my child want to solve? What are they good at solving? Because as we put ourselves out there as problem solvers and not job doers, that's what will differentiate us. The reward for solving problems is more problems. But the goal is let's make those problems ones that we get energy from versus completely depleted against.
Thank you again, Colby. And for anyone watching, if you have topics you want us to cover in future videos, send them our way. We want to hear what's on your mind. We want to be able to help in whatever way we can. And hopefully, we will see Colby back here next quarter.